Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MakerDAO Scientific Governance and Risk Meeting, number 132, taking place on Thursday, March 11th at 1700 UTC. My name is Long for Wisdom. I'm the governance facilitator at MakerDAO right now. I'm joined by close to 40 people talking about Maker and Maker-related things. So as usual, we've got a bit of an agenda to get through, kind of usual updates from the kind of main domains and other kind of regular groups. And then I don't think we have any sort of specific segments for this week, so we'll kind of just get through the updates and then kind of go into some discussion. Usual kind of preamble. If you kind of want to interrupt or kind of comment or ask questions, please do. We'd love to hear from everyone. And yeah. All right, so I think that gets through the hosting and introduction parts. So I'll move into the weekly governance updates. So let's see, we had an executive last week containing the kind of initial implementation of real-world asset 001 success with preliminary parameters for testing purposes. The vault isn't quite online yet, but this is kind of a major step in that direction, which is awesome to see. We also increased the ETH target available debt from 30 million to 80 million. This is also known as the gap. It's the kind of amount of debt that the debt ceiling instant access, sorry, the amount of available space the debt ceiling instant access module tries to maintain within the ETH vault type. And then we also approved some collateral auction parameter updates, which are maybe too many to kind of list. But yeah, please check out the kind of executive page to see what those were if you're unaware. We also just finished the weekly polls, just over an hour ago. So it was mainly inclusion polls this week, but we also had a rates proposal poll, which includes the kind of minor increases to some of the Uniswap LP token stability fees, and some other kind of minor changes. Nothing like too major in there. We also saw, as I said, inclusion polls for this week's kind of this month's governance cycle. I think all of these passed, which was good. Good to see. So that includes the kind of core unit MIP set and the three initial core units: real-world finance, governance, and risk. We also saw the liquidations 2.0 updates, inclusion poll pass, as well as some other sort of some other kind of technical changes. The KEG streaming payments module, the term lending module, and some kind of softer sort of governance stuff like multi-sig wallet management and parameter proposal groups. So that's cool. Those will continue to the next MIPS bundle poll next week. This week's executive, I believe, will include ETH onboarding and the rates updates I just mentioned. Chris can maybe confirm in his section. But yeah, I think that covers kind of this last week's kind of governance actions in terms of the governance domain. So what me and some others and the kind of governance contributors have been doing. We did a presentation on GovAlpha, which is the governance core units, on yesterday. We're in the process of kind of rewriting some of MIP 0 to kind of make it more accessible. The kind of aim here is to not make any sort of actual content changes or sort of like logic or any sort of changes that would be, sort of something where someone would look at and go, what are you doing, right? Just kind of changes to make it more accessible, more clear, and hopefully shorter because it's quite long currently. So we're working on that. We're also working on some liquidation 2.0 documentation, specifically around the parameters and kind of aimed at kind of governance, so governance can kind of easily get an overview of what each parameter is and what it means, what it does, trade-offs, etc. And we also had Eli working on the kind of MakerDAO vision setting kind of project, which I believe we're calling Project Compass. Which perhaps sort of Amy or Juan can talk about a little bit later. But yeah. So I think that covers our kind of weekly weekly activities. So with that, we'll maybe move on to governance at a glance from Eli this week, I believe.
Thank you, Lon. My name is Eli, and I'll be doing governance at a glance for you guys this week. So first up, a 3-point summary, some numbers. Total value locked in MakerDAO as of today is $6.8 billion. The DAI supply keeps reaching new highs with currently 2.6 billion. And DAI's volume weighted average price is stable at 1.001. On to announcements. The third session of the Core Unit launch podcast will take place on Wednesday, March 17th. Feel free to join our host Juan along with the Smart Contracts Core Unit team to discuss their proposal. Second up, the MakerDAO community will be launching DAI on the Optimism Layer 2 solution, enabling near instant withdrawals of DAI tokens and thus enabling wider adoption of Optimism and also profiting from it. And lastly, DAI has now been integrated into the GloveCo service switch to allow the direct exchange of DAI to USD or VES in Venezuela. More regional currencies are also expected to be added in the future. On to active discussions. Aaron Barch starts off a discussion on useful features the community would like to see come to life. Second up, Astronaut This starts a discussion around DAI's supposed over-reliance on other stablecoins, e.g. USDC. Lastly, Signal Requests, Aaron also proposes increasing the bump and TTL parameters of flop auctions to decrease the number of auctions and give participants more time to accrue funds. And last but not least, Ultra Shupi proposes raising the surplus buffer with voting options going up to 80 million from the current 30. Thank you very much.
Cool, it's muted. Thank you, Eli. Appreciate that. Right. I think that maybe brings us on to smart contracts then. Chris, do you want to give us an update?
Sure. What did you want me to comment on, Lon, in my segment?
Oh, just the whether ETH would be in the executive this week. I believe it is.
Yes.
Just to confirm.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. It will be. So hi everybody. Chris from the Smart Contracts team. So we didn't have any collateral onboarding priority sheet work this week or collateral assessments. However, we are in the process of deploying ETH to Kovan. And so we've got, I think, maybe one more review and then we'll end up pushing that to Kovan. Most of the sort of tooling that we were updating has been kind of finished and is now just like part of our ongoing process at this point. And then on to MIP 45, which is liquidations 2.0. So we've completed some of the deploy scripts for that, and we're prepping that for Kovan. We were hoping to have it on Monday, and the sort of like list of dependencies around it keeps growing. And so we've gotten back some of the like audit feedback. There were a couple like gas optimizations that we think we're going to make. And then once we do that, we also need to create a Clipper mom for the circuit breaker capabilities. We need to create a new ESM because we have to replace the old end contract. We need to make some updates around the ILK registry. And yeah, like I said, the gas optimization PRs and whatnot. Then there's an additional, maybe, I want to say an economic maybe attack or situation that we could get into that we've been considering. And we've got like maybe either do nothing because it's, you know, the parameters we have are good enough, or we've got a couple other like changes we could make, like rate limiting the amount of dirt that we dig out of the hole. So so that's where liquidations 2.0 is. I think we're going to push it back about a week. So Kovan will be ready a week from now. So that's to any team or integrator that's depending on that. Expect to see those addresses sometime next week so that we have a little bit more time to kind of chew on these last bits and coordinate all these like extra sort of components outside on the edges of the system.
Chris, sorry
yep.
to interrupt. Can you, at this point, can you show the timeline again?
Yeah.
So that people can see what it means when it's pushed out a week.
Yep. Let me let's see if I can actually find the timeline here. And Yeah, can you give me?
While you're doing that, I just want to mention that we are still actually waiting on the Trail of Bits audit as well. So things can happen between now and then. I don't want to say they will. We're not expecting any surprises, but just keep that in mind.
So can everybody see my screen? Yep. So let's see, where are we? We're on the 11th, right? So we're on the 11th. We're hoping to have that Covan deployment. So if you can imagine, we shift this Covan deployment by a week. This entire set of other requirements is going to end up shifting by a week as well. So and this is kind of going to be part of my next portion. I was just going to talk and say that, you know, we're going to do link first, and then that'll allow like everyone to sort of tool up around link, all of the keepers and any UIs and whatnot to make sure link works. And we're going to add Wi-Fi right after that. So these are two like sort of mid-range collaterals. This allows keepers to make sure that they can handle multiple collaterals at once, and then we're going to go for the big ones. So we're going to go for ETH and WBTC. Then the rest of all of the normal collateral types, and then because unwinding LP tokens is a little bit more complicated, we'll go to that last. But everyone can kind of see the sort of coordination that's happening across like many other teams, and so we've got, you know, databases and integrations and UIs. So all of that is there. Does anybody have any questions about the timeline before I stop sharing?
One question was if you could zoom in a little on some of the current times.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Let's see. Does that help a little bit? So this would be the 11th. Is that a little bit bigger?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Okay. So it's your Covan. We've got also the final reports for PwC and QuantStamp are in. Trail of Bits is still going. Every Friday we've got another session with them. They're going to be a little bit further out. And then Gauntlet has given us enough feedback for us to choose some good parameters with Risk. And so Risk is still working with Gauntlet, but I think this might even end up being like more of an ongoing engagement so that we can continue to sort of simulate those risk parameters and keep them up to date. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to you guys. Let's see. So then on to MIP 21, which we deployed to mainnet. Hooray! We still on our team have the one responsibility of sitting down with Success and actually doing a circuit, so a sort of dress rehearsal of the small debt ceiling that we gave them, just to make sure that all those contracts are connected up correctly. And then with MIP 22, we sat down with the Centrifuge team yesterday, and we had a discussion about, you know, changing maybe a little bit of the implementation. Anyway, more on that later as we actually converge on something. But and then there's a portion of our team that's working on a security strategy. So this is like you know, sort of formal verification and you know, the path that helps us ensure contract correctness and security of the protocol going forward. So they're going to have a sort of strategy that they'll be releasing soon. And then just for miscellaneous work, we've had like, you know, we're reviewing authorizations of some of the mappings for authorizations to oracles and other contracts. And then we've been doing a little bit of work with the SE domain team budget, which I think there's going to be a community call maybe next week with Derek. And I don't know, Derek, if you want to invite people to that, maybe throw the details in the sidebar or go ahead and speak up after or now.
Yeah. We'll get the invite out there. I think Juan created it yesterday. So yeah, definitely Wednesday next week. Everyone come along, and yeah, we'll share in all the usual channels.
And then last but not least, we obviously have been doing a little bit of side work on this L2 Optimism DAI bridge. I want to thank sort of Sam and other elements of the community that have been putting that together. And I don't know, Sam, if you want to say anything about it. Yeah, please do.
Sure, yeah. So earlier this week, I put out an announcement that we were going to be bringing DAI to Optimism L2. Seemed to receive quite a bit of attention and excitement, so that's great. I think it's a big opportunity for Maker to become sort of the primary off-ramp for Optimism L2, and really for other optimistic rollups that may come in the future as well. So even since then, there's been a few developments. We have open sourced the code here, so you can follow along. It's now all public. We are currently building the first version of the bridge. It will be using a multi-sig wallet just due to the time constraints. Optimism is coming online, they say, at the end of the month. So we kind of have very limited time to get this thing in place. So the plan is to roll out with a version 1 of the bridge, and then later upgrade once we can sort of get proper audits and have time to flesh it all out, including governance access to L2. So yeah, the plan is to deploy the initial bridge along with Optimism's release or shortly thereafter. And at that point, it's considered fairly experimental. So, it's crypto, so everybody's going to ape in probably, but just be very careful when using Optimism in general. This is an experimental technology, so caution is advised. And in addition to that, we're going to be deploying a new version of DAI, which gives us a chance to modernize things like the permit function, which is using an old one, like the current one on L1 is using an old version of permit. So we're able to modernize that. We get some minor gas efficiency improvements, as well as we are potentially going to add in flash minting capability as well right into the token, which it's kind of interesting. I mean, we may get flash minting on L2 before we get it on L1. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff going on. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Oh, bad connection?
I think
You're
you're
fine.
okay.
That's me.
So,
Yeah, it's me.
one thing I would just say, just to clarify, you mean deploying an upgraded version of DAI to L2 to Optimism? Yes, not on mainnet.
Oh, yeah, this is all on L2. There is a component of the bridge that's on L1. So the bridge itself is going to be upgradable, but the DAI contract on L2 is going to be set in stone once we deploy it. Same as L1.
Do we want to talk kind of strategy for a second? I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, right? But if DAI is the only token that has flash withdrawals, and in particular, the only stable token that has kind of, these fast withdrawals on Optimism, that is a niche that we can kind of conquer very well, against the likes of things like USDC and Tether, right, which would suffer from kind of capital inefficiency when you can't pull them off that quickly. Where from a product point of view, from a technical point of view, we could easily support, right, every single stablecoin, right? But the question is, do we want to? Just kind of something for people to ponder about a little bit.
Yeah, I think like Circle and things could probably offer the same fast withdrawal bridge, right? It would just be centralized based on their setup.
Yeah, the nice thing about us though is that because we can mint DAI, we can always have like a liquidity availability advantage. We'll be able to like undercut others' fees and stuff because they have to lock up capital on the other end.
So that's true in general. I'm not sure that's true like of the other decentralized stablecoin providers, right? Like no more than their usual the liquidity requirements they already have, right?
They have to lock up US dollars and stuff.
Yeah, but it also depends on if it's ultimately both directions that happen, it'll be a little bit of an offset similar to TransferWise, where there'll be at some point initially, you're right. And then over time, you would think they would have some type of like harmony where there'd be as much money going into L2 as coming out of L2.
Yeah, I mean, this all remains to be seen what happens exactly, but I do know we have sort of the upper edge of the advantage here. Maybe others can match us, but we should be at the front of this, I believe, just because we can mint DAI.
Yeah, I think Circle can do the same because as you go into the bridge, the token USDC is again on Circle balance sheet, so they can mint another USDC on L1 as well. They don't have a capital need neither. I would say because the USDC outstanding doesn't change.
They may not have them like at the launch of Optimism though. So that's
yeah, I'm quite sure they will have to check that with legal, and legal always take a lot of time. So we are good on this part.
All right. Does that do for smart contracts updates?
Yeah, that's it for us.
Yeah, I should mention that there was some conversation in the sidebar here. We do not plan to make the community does not plan to make the DAI token on Optimism upgradable. Sam did post the link to that earlier, so if you have any quibbles, qualms, or concerns about that, consider this maybe like a RFC period while we're working on that.
Great, thank you, Brian. That's a good point. All right, so that maybe brings us to oracles then. Nick, have you got any updates for us this week?
Quick update this week. We are pushing the patched version of Scuttlebutt into production. This fixes the state size kind of bug that that Scuttlebutt has, where it has that hard-coded limit, right? That determines how big it can get before it just kind of like blows up. So that was the issue that had affected us during Thanksgiving. So really happy that we can finally get that out the door. So with this, we won't be having to upgrade, kind of reset the Scuttlebutt network every 2 months, which anyone involved in that can tell you is just tedious and frustrating. So glad that we could finally get that out the door. We've also been reviewing the feedback from the Abdk audit on the Uniswap LP Oracle. They cited a few things, nothing major, right? Nothing that would be exploitable or functionality breaking, but definitely, a couple things that we want to take a look at and fix. So we're hoping to have a kind of revised version out by the end of next week, and kind of giving that back to Abdk to kind of re-review our changes, and then they'll compile kind of a final report that we'll then receive. So that, given that we get the green light from the final report, right, then we can start to consider raising the debt ceilings for the LP tokens. I say consider and not guaranteed, because I think Primož needs to weigh in on the risk side in terms of liquidations. I know there was maybe not now, but I know in the past there was definitely a LP auction that did not go very well for the vault owner, and so we want to be sure that that the keepers are there, that they support LP tokens, and that they're actually willing to buy the LP tokens, right before we kind of crank up the juice on this thing. But definitely a step in the right direction, and things are looking good.
Great, yeah, good to hear this sort of progress coming on those. I think everyone's excited to see the Uniswap LP tokens increase the ceiling. All right, so if there's no other questions for Nick, then we can move to risk.
Yep. So also not huge amount of updates from our side this week, because we're mostly focused on preparing a draft proposal for liquidations 2.0 parameters. And as was already mentioned by Chris, we'll start with Link, because we may not want to implement it initially for ETH vaults, and Link seems to be a better candidate for trial run, because there's still decent amount of vaults there that could get liquidated, so we can test it. Also because liquidation ratio is a bit higher, so we can test the the auctions price curve. There's still some discussions. Chris mentioned how to mitigate certain risks around limiting the amount of pending auctions. And that's because the auction throughput in Liquidations 2.0 can be really high. So we may want to still limit it somehow, and we need to adjust some parameters. There's also one other potential adjustment, which is to lower the dependency of auction price curve on OSM price. So this was discussed on forums. So this should be made or could be made in order to protect against historical attacks when the auction starts. In any case, we should have our analysis and proposal hopefully ready next week. And we should also include findings and recommendations from Gauntlet, which made some nice simulations. We got pretty similar results with them, which is good because they use GBM model to simulate liquidations, whereas we focus particularly on simulating this auction design on Black Thursday price drop. So it's good that we got similar results by using different methodology. And then regarding parameters this week, so some changes, potential changes this or next week. There are a few signals that are ending this week, and winning votes should go into on-chain poll on Monday. So I think we'll have on-chain vote next week to increase dust level from current 2,000 DAI to 5,000 DAI for all wall types except for ETB, where the dust value that was proposed or actually voted was to be 15,000 DAI for ETB. The other two changes based on signal requests are to increase maximum depth ceiling for very Bitcoin A to 500 million. This is something that we also proposed. And then to increase maximum depth ceiling for ETA to 15 billion. So practically no limit on ETA, which sounds a bit odd, but I think we explained a few times, we plan to limit ETA depth exposure by using rates as a tool. And I think that's pretty much all I had to say for today. As I said, Liquidations 2.0 parameters are focused right now and in the coming weeks.
Cool. Yeah, I personally am looking forward to seeing the kind of gauntlet simulations and things they've done. It's kind of been hearing about them for a while and excited to see what they look like. Does anyone have any questions for Pramosh on any of those things? All right, let's move on to reward finance. Seb?
Yeah, thanks. So the weeks was mainly on legal stuff. So we made a first call with success and the maybe future core unit, legal core unit on MakerDAO to onboard them on success. We had a call with an SPV service firm that could help us to scale the SPV business and make it more secure, more work on legal structures, stuff like that. You will have the consult flight document review later this week. We are just waiting for a last review, but it should be done by tomorrow, I guess. And we are making an appointment with a law firm to review most of the documents that we will have to not sign, because we cannot sign, but to agree on at the end to be sure that there is no issue. So I just want to start by looking how much it would cost to hire a lawyer and check those documents and check those the legal aspect of everything. On the analytics side, as you know, we have a financial statement on Dune Analytics that works very well. Sadly, the pivot table presentation will be removed from Dune Analytics. I heard about this morning, so it will not work starting next month or next week. I don't remember well. So I will have to find another solution to continue to track the financial of MakerDAO. So more on that in the following weeks. We did a review of MIP21 and MIP22, not on the purely smart contract side, but just to understand how it will work with the rest of the legal structure of real-world assets. The meeting yesterday was very great with smart contract and centrifuge to work on MIP22, a lot of progress. And lastly, we took a little bit of time to look at the real-world asset competition we have in DeFi, because when we started last year, we were alone, more or less. But now there is a lot of competition that is starting. And on one end, it can be bad as it is a competition. On the other hand, it can be a good opportunity because we can probably use those protocols to delegate the management of real-world assets at some point. And so it could be a solution to scale real-world assets. Because currently our idea was to scale on how to scale a real-world asset was to, instead of using asset originators, which are very specific, to use asset managers that will manage a lot of asset originators, so the bigger pool of assets, but maybe we can use something that is more DeFi compliant using other protocols. There is a lot of other protocols that are dealing with real assets, but the space is super early, not as early as optimistic, but still super early. So it will take a lot of time to see if there is something interesting to be done in this case. And that's about it for real-world finance. If you have some questions, happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Seb. All right, I guess with that, we'll come to operational support, I believe.
Yep.
Maybe this week.
Just putting our summary in the chat. So in terms of know your MIP and collateral onboarding, no calls for those coming up a little bit later. We will start resuming them. A lot of the focus has been on the core units and their developments. One thing I want to point out is Juan just posted a little bit earlier today about what are some of the critical functions that core units must cover as kind of to continue the development of the protocol. So it would be great to have some kind of insights in there. Then we can follow some of the live developments as well, always on the core unit kind of MakerDAO.network Notion page, so you know what's coming up next. We did recently have a call with the Gov Alpha for this Launchpad series, and just so if you guys don't know, the Launchpad sessions are about the core units that want to present about what their team is about. Maybe it's about the mandate, little people going to ask questions. I think we jokingly said it's sort of like a job interview. So please participate, ask all the questions that you want to ask. So the calls coming up, we have quite a few. So tomorrow we have Sablayer as one of the core unit tools. So the core unit tools calls are just tools that you could use as a core unit. And so Sablayer is the streaming where you stream money to whoever is working for you. The next one is Wednesday. So Wednesday is the very popular smart contracts team core units discussion. One thing I did want to point out is that the Launchpad series sessions are about the core unit itself. So there's a lot of conversation around investing, for example. And so Derek's not necessarily kind of defending vesting at large. It's specific to smart contracts. So it would be great to bring questions for smart contracts regarding those areas as well. And then I was thinking that on Thursday after next GNR call, we would bring up the discussion more generally around incentives investing as a larger governance conversation. So Long will add that to the agenda. So after we have the smart contracts, we can kind of compare and talk about some of the summaries and takeaways from that call. Then that same Friday, we will have Real World Finance them present their core units as well. So feel free to join that. And then later we'll have content production in the upcoming week. We had 4 core units move into RFC. No, actually 3 I think are new. So we have Growth core unit, which did a session and the recording is on YouTube. Smart contracts and content production, and then MakerDAO Shop by Coulter. There is one draft, there's a few drafts in progress. I do want to mention that although there are updates on the core unit.makerdao network kind of Notion page, we do have a lot that are still being discussed that haven't been posted as a draft publicly. So those are also coming up. But with the few that are updated, Kathleen posted strategic communications, PR, and marketing. And that one in particular is, she just like updated the MIP and added budgets and such. And that's still in draft. It hasn't formally moved into the forum yet. So you can kind of leave it in the Google document. There's, as I mentioned, there's a few drafts in progress. The most probably interesting conversation that's happening now is around MKR vesting and incentives at large. And that discussion was kind of catalyzed by the smart contracts budget. Long and I were discussing maybe bringing that thread out of the smart contracts specifically, because there's a larger conversation around should the incentives be threaded at a higher level, or should it be core units? What's a better framework? What are mechanisms? So we'll be discussing that a little bit deeper next week, so that we kind of have a chance to read and process some of the conversations that are happening there. Any questions? Otherwise, that's it for us.
Amy, I was just going to add that in the lead up to the Wednesday call next week, I'll definitely broaden the conversation to the smart contract team, how we are looking to evolve over time, a discussion around potential sub-teams and the different themes that we cover, the team as it is today, and likewise how it'll grow. So yeah, if there's any questions from the community in the lead up to that, feel free to drop them into the forum post that I wrote with regards to the team, and we can keep the discussion there. And yeah, happy to dive in and answer all the questions that come up, and I'll have a presentation we can walk through to get a better feel of what the team's vision is, what my vision is as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having that conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you both. Yeah, Derek, I'm definitely going to try and catch the smart contracts meeting, core unit meeting. That sounds, yeah, I'm excited to see the presentation. All right then. So that maybe brings us to MIPs. Whose turn is it this week? I cannot keep track. Charles, this week.
Yeah, it's me.
There you go.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. All right. All right, so for this weekly MIPS update, last week we had the formal submission period for March's governance cycle, ending on Wednesday, March 3rd, and there were a total of 21 proposals formally submitted of a 32 that were eligible. And this included MIPS spanning from technical, general process, core unit proposals, and amendments. And on Thursday, all 21 proposals were confirmed by Along for Wisdom to proceed to that inclusion poll stage this Monday, March 8th. So the proposals that were put up for inclusion polls were bundled into specific areas, because 21 inclusion polls is quite a lot to vote on. So we had them broken down into, the first is the KEG bundle, where it covers the streaming payments using the KEG, and then actually the KEG streaming payment module itself. And then there was the core unit framework, highlighting the entire framework for core unit details, the facilitator framework, budget framework, and overall the DAO primitives, as well as 2 amendments that if this framework is approved, the amendments would occur to the previous rules that were defined in MIP 16 and MIP 0. Additionally, we had 2 technical proposals. One was the term lending module, and of course, we had the liquidations 2.0. And general proposals, we had parameter proposal groups and the MakerDAO multi-sig wallet management. And lastly, just the 3 core unit MIP sets for real-world finance onboarding, core unit onboarding, and the governance team onboarding, Govern Alpha, that is. So this week we had those 21 proposals get voted on in inclusion polls, and the result was really great. All the proposals were successfully passed. So today we're going to have Long for Wisdom confirm that all the proposals are eligible for next week's monthly MIPS governance poll on Monday. In terms of other updates, that should say March. The March community greenlight polls will go out on next Monday, March 15th. And I'll show briefly after the newly submitted proposal review which greenlight polls that will be. The newly submitted proposals, I think Amy also mentioned it, but we had 3 core units get proposed and are now in RFC. That's for the marketing core unit set, the MakerDAO shop core unit, and the growth core unit. Additionally, we had declarations of intent put forward for Eurodai, and the previous one has been worked on and iterated on by Andrew Bourbon and co. for a compensation addendum for MakerDAO contributors. And lastly, a official MIP 0 amendments is being worked on as well by the governance domain team. So the proposals that are eligible for community greenlights are first are ETH, 2 Curve LP tokens, 2 Aave tokens, SUSD, Synthetics, XSushi, SolarX, and SBBFDC. So there's 10 in total that will be up put forward on Monday. So don't forget to vote when those go up. And that sums up my presentation for today.
Perfect. Thank you, Charles. I'll just very quickly confirm that yes, the inclusion polls that were successful will go to next week's MIPS bundle poll.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions about, I guess, MIPS generally? Anything that's currently up as a MIP?
Oh, it looks like Eli had something to add that there were also MIP 9 amendments put forward in RFC recently. So add that to the list.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff in RFC at this point. Cool. All right. I believe that brings us to the end of our kind of formal agenda, which means we're essentially moving into the chat discussions and general QA section of the call. So if anyone has any questions on anything we've discussed or wants to start a discussion about anything specific, please feel free to chime in.
Do we want to talk about the governance process for L2?
Yeah, that was discussed. That was in the sidebar a little bit, so maybe we can kind of discuss that briefly. I think the questions were kind of around whether whether we should do any sort of governance actions regarding the Optimism DAI bridge proposal, like announcement, I guess. So maybe Sam can sort of chime in with what he thinks makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So what I said in the post is we can run a declaration of intent for the fast withdrawal piece, but due to the time constraints, like we need to get this online quickly after Optimism goes up, just because it's a permissionless sort of system. If we don't offer this as sort of an official bridge, somebody else can kind of just take over and become the official DAI on Optimism. So just out of necessity, we have to kind of move quickly. But I definitely wouldn't be opposed to like running a signal request or like an urgent poll or something, whatever would fit best, just to get like, yep, we should go forward with this or not.
Yeah, I definitely don't see any reason we can't put up a poll. Let's see, it's 11th now. We're expecting Optimism towards the end of the month, right?
Yeah, that's what they said, but who knows?
Yeah, true. Yeah, we can put the poll up next week on Monday, I guess, just to sort of, I guess, kind of confirm the direction, or that make orders sort of happy with the direction. is that something you want to kind of write up, Sam? Or...
Sure.
All right. Easy enough. That was a fairly quick discussion. Does anyone, I guess, think we should be doing anything more in terms of governance for that issue?
It was brushed over really quickly, but in the interim, from what I understand, there will be a multi-sig on Optimism that will be controlling governance of that DAI token. So there will be some, authorizations to change parameters and things like that, at least in the short term, until or unless they decide to remove their authorizations. So maybe there is some more discussion about who's going to be in control of that multi-sig and for how long.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I kind of assumed you guys already had an idea, but have you kind of thought about who would be key holders for that already? Or
I don't want to make any statement on behalf of the Foundation smart contract team regarding Optimism. So I'm just kind of throwing this out there for governance.
Yeah, we need to work that out.
Just kind of quick sentiment check, would people be against just having the mandated actors that are not a part of the Foundation be the signatories on the multi-sig? Is that is anyone kind of immediately against that, gut check?
I mean, as one of the key holders, I'm not thrilled, but that's fine. We're kind of the default option, I guess. Yeah, that's something we can maybe discuss a little bit offline, and then kind of incorporate as part of the poll that we mentioned in terms of who would have governance control of that in the meantime.
Yeah, and Kurt, you're correct. So we will definitely want to give governance control. It's just, it's not super trivial to forward the executive intent up into L2. So this was just quick and dirty and sort of just, we need to get something up. And yes, definitely, even medium term, we want to shift that over to governance.
I guess this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but technically wise, does that need to be a multi-sig that's set up on Optimism? Or is it an
Yes.
L1? Okay. So
yeah, there's teams working on it right now, building a multi-sig, I believe using the Gnosis multi-sig. This is the problem that almost every team in the ecosystem has right now. So it's being worked on.
I guess audits for that can have to be pretty swift.
Yeah. People want L2 and they want it fast.
Cool. Any other questions or comments, I guess, on the Optimism DAI bridge governance thereof?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask, is this something that has to happen for every bridge? And yeah, I forgot the second question, sorry.
What do you mean? Which component has to happen for every bridge?
The multi-sig does, for example, if somebody wants to go to Matter Labs, CK, and somebody wants to deploy DAI there, or even to another bridge. I know that Near is working on the Rainbow Bridge, which is voluntarily, so I guess that wouldn't work. And then obviously Polkadot is going to do something on their end. So I was just wondering if this is something that has to happen for every single bridge as far as multi-sigs, or
for every. Sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, it definitely doesn't have to happen. It has to happen if we want sort of administrative controls on things. So the bridge, because we're kind of rushing it out there, it is a version 1, and we are 100% going to upgrade it as we sort of wrap our heads around the ecosystem. So in order to facilitate that bridge upgrade, we do need some administrative control. Otherwise, it's just set in stone, and we can't shift the. Go ahead.
I think the distinction here is not between having a multi-sig or no control. Is there a multi-sig, or is control somehow given to the governance smart contracts, the pause and the chief and such, right? And it's really going to depend on like a bridge by bridge basis, and like the extent to which bridge technology has developed. Right now, since this is the very first one, there's some challenges to doing direct chief control immediately. In the long term, assuming we want governance to have influence over all the DAI bridges, which I assume we will, it may need to start out with a multi-sig, or we may need to be able to start directly with the chief being in control. It just depends on how the technology develops.
So right now, if you want to transfer your DAI to XDAI, right, it goes through a bridge that is controlled by the XDAI Foundation, and it becomes the native token on that network. If you want to transfer to Binance Smart Chain, Binance actually wraps that token and gives you a receipt on the other side. So those are DAI placeholders that are out of our control on those other networks. And so what this would do is it would give us the full control of the DAI on Optimism. And the reason we want that is because the bridge will need to mint DAI as it gets passed through. But then we'll also want authorizations on that to also give the mint authority to a new system if for example, MCD were deployed on layer 2 entirely, or some smaller component that allows DAI generation. So right now on mainnet, the only thing that can mint DAI is the DAI join adapter. So governance can't even really mint DAI if they wanted to. But on L2, we're going to have the ability to have multiple ways to mint DAI, like with the bridge, and maybe another implementation of some version of MCD or a lighter version.
So does that mean that Binance could technically on their own mint a synthetic of DAI?
They already do. I think there was over 50 million DAI in Binance Smart Chain already that's wrapped into a wrapped Binance DAI.
Oh, but I meant the synthetic of a synthetic. Sorry, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you're basically asking, can they mint DAI that isn't backed, right? Is essentially what you're asking, right?
Well, it's not DAI then, really. Right? It's like, yeah, somebody can, the same way that the maker system creates a stablecoin pegged to US dollars, even though nobody's locked up dollars in a bank account for that. Yeah, anybody can go make a system that creates a synthetic that's pegged to DAI if they want to, using any sort of algorithmic stablecoin method they prefer.
Yeah, that would really only affect the DAI on Binance Smart Chain though, so they can mint all they want. You would be responsible for auditing the amount of DAI that's in the wrapper contract that they have on Ethereum mainnet. I don't know how they do it. They might actually be wrapping additional DAI that's on their centralized order book. So keep that in mind as well. I'm not sure if it's all on-chain holdings or not.
Yeah, it really only affects you if you're a user of that synthetic DAI. Because if you wanted to bring it back to Ethereum and actually use it as DAI, you'd have to find somebody who is willing to let you convert it 1-to-1 into real DAI ERC20s.
Yeah, I think it's more maybe just our problem if like Binance passes it off as real DAI when it's potentially not, right? Which I don't think they're doing at the moment, and presumably have no plans to do so. But yeah.
Hopefully they don't do that, and hopefully people don't fall for it if they do. But
yeah, I know.
I guess I had a question in terms of like the risk on the layer 1 side. Like what exactly are we dealing with here? Because it seems like a pretty basic no-brainer, but I guess maybe a more thorough explanation of kind of where the risk to the system lies in implementing this might be useful.
Yeah, so because it's entirely opt-in, and really anybody could deploy a bridge, we're not special in this regard because it's permissionless. There is no obvious risk to like maker system. Yeah, it's pretty safe, and I mean this is going to go up one way or another, so it's better if we get one we can control and sort of promote.
I mean, there's always smart contract risk, right? Like there's the risk that the DAI that goes into the L1 bridge component can get stuck there. That the message passing doesn't go through on the other side. Like those are kind of technical implementation details that we have to worry about. Yeah, it's not completely risk free, but
yeah,
we have
like
to figure that out.
you can make a pretty short list of what are the things that could go wrong when you're locking a die in a contract like this. The die could get stuck in that contract, like Brian said. Maybe the contract has a vulnerability and someone steals the die, right? We've just got to do the due diligence and testing and stuff to make sure that we didn't write any bugs in it. And those are really the only main real things that could go wrong, is basically that die either gets taken out or gets stuck. And then you can trace through to the monetary impacts on the system from there.
I'll also clarify the fast withdrawal component. That is going to present risks we need to analyze for the system because it's a new collateral type.
Yeah, although I think it's worth noting that we can enable a bridge without enabling the fast withdrawal if for some reason risks are discovered that make that unattractive. So it's important to make that distinction, I think. It's like we can have the bridge with its particular risks, with or without the particular risks of fast withdrawal.
Yeah, I mean the L2 portion of it having the ability to mint a token that we're calling DAI, if that were somehow subverted, you could theoretically mint any number of it over there. So the message passing has to be tight too.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't translate back to L1, so that's not a risk to L1 or to the main system. It's a risk to users of the L2 or things that are relying on that wrapped L2 token. So there are risks on the L2 side for people transacting there as well, but those don't really translate back into L1 risks. Except
than politics.
Stuff gets locked on L2, and then that means you can't get it out of L1.
Yeah, so I would say the risks are more like not technical, but potentially reputational, right? If the L2 die explodes, then that's not ideal for us. Yeah. Yeah, so that's maybe a good point, Derek. Do you want to kind of briefly say that on the recording as well?
Yeah, so I was looking at multi-chain the other day, and as you have a look at the tokens there, you could imagine a scenario where optimism launches, and like Sam's point around the permissionless nature of L2 means that you could end up with multiple versions of DAI or any other token on there. And for a user experience, that could be quite challenging because, like Kurt said, if you choose the wrong one, you may not be able to revert back to L1. So could be a loss of funds, for example.
Yeah, it's also just a nightmare for any integrations, right? If there's like 3 copies of every token, then like anyone who wants to build anything on L2 is gonna just a real bad day.
Yeah.
But I mean, this happens in the real world, right? Like the Bahamas dollar is a dollar, and US dollars get lost everywhere. So I guess if some of these people take a risk of, minting DAI or taking DAI on Binance or any other layer 2 chain, that's just part of life, I guess. I mean, the Bahamian dollar example is probably a bad example, but you know what I mean? Like everybody wants to make a dollar, right? So I guess eventually everyone's going to want to make a DAI out of 15 cents. So I guess what I'm saying is that DAI is DAI, and you either have the real thing or you don't have the real thing, in my opinion.
Yep, it's I think a perspective that hopefully will begin to be shared more widely. Frank.
Yeah, Frank, I kind of was thinking while you were saying that like it is a kind of a risk to the mainnet system if our L1 DAI does get locked up in contracts. So if it gets sent to Binance Smart Chain and then they decide, we're not letting it out, that can that can put pressures upward on the peg. Same if we have an L1 bridge or multiple L1 bridges that lock large amounts of DAI up, and our vault holders can't repay their debt. That could be problematic for us, and we'd have to try and solve that and get more liquidity on the market.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that. The peg.
All right.
Hey, and speaking of the peg, I was wondering if Primož is still around, if he can kind of give us a little bit of a tidbit of the Gauntlet report on Liquidations 2.0, if he's able to speak on it and just kind of give us an idea. I know that Chris mentioned that the risk team is working with Gauntlet. Just wanted to get an idea of what their initial thoughts are of Liquidations 2.0, if possible.
Yeah, so probably next week, we should publish analysis on proposed parameters. And I was thinking to include my findings, but also Gauntlet's findings, but not really sure now whether they actually want to come on a call and maybe, present their findings on their own. So I can't really speak on their behalf, but so far it looks good. So they basically use GBM model. They simulated different combination of parameters, and there's like how many 9 parameters possible for each vault type. So it can get pretty complicated. But yeah, like the thing we're mostly concentrated to is the price curve. So how steep the price curve should be. What's the draw? What are the pros and cons if you make it steeper or flatter? When do auctions in general clear? Is it too fast? Is it too, does it take too much time? And so on. So we got similar results in terms of some ranges of parameters. So that's good. But we're still discovering. We're still optimizing what's the best combination of parameters. The one that they haven't really focused on is the ilk hole and hole, I think. So that's the limiting. So that's the pending amount of liquidations that can happen. So similar to box, we have our own methodology to define this value, but there are also other possible ways. So I think that's something that we want to check with them as well. But yeah, I can't really make a whole presentation right now on their behalf. So just a quick snapshot of what's happening.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Primož.
I guess maybe I have a question off the back of that. You kind of mentioned that there are like sort of maybe like 9 different parameters for each like vault type, and I guess I kind of like that is an increase in complexity over the current system. And I guess I'm interested if there's any way of kind of making that less complex for governance when they kind of have to deal with it. Like, do you kind of expect those 9 parameters to be different for every vault type? Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I've been thinking about this one a lot. So I imagine we'll make few changes for vault types that have higher collateralization ratio than for those that have lower one. Partially, this is associated also with volatility of the asset. So the more volatile the asset is, normally it has a higher liquidation ratio in your system. And this affects also the price curve, which we're going to choose, and the buffer, so the starting price above OSM. So I imagine we'll make differences among 130, 150, 175. So these are liquidation ratio. These are the 3 ranges I think we offer, apart from stablecoins, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll make changes based on that, and then yeah, for stablecoins, completely other story. But yeah, and then the most obvious one where there will be literally a change for each vault type is the ilk hole. So this is the thing that I mentioned. This is similar to box per vault type, how much it can be liquidated at once. And here we'll probably use some on-chain liquidity metric just to be sure. Basically, we're just thinking about methodology here. You could say, for link, you would obviously go to some aggregator such as 1inch, check how much link needs to be sold for DAI to reach certain amount of slippage. Then we would decide what kind of slippage makes sense, again, in a reasonable time of those pending liquidations happening. So this would be one way. But yeah, I don't expect huge differences. Like even currently liquidations 1.0, most of the auction parameters are quite the same. And it's also like, it's not like all these collaterals are, even though some are more volatile, they have totally different profile. When prices crashes, they pretty much crash all similarly.
Yeah, I guess that makes kind of sense to me. I guess in terms of, so the other thing I was curious about, in terms of like price curves, like there's kind of any number of like mathematical functions you potentially could use as a like price function or price curve. Like I guess how variable should we expect that to be, I guess?
It's going to be exponential price curve. And not linear. Why is that? I think that makes sense because you're starting above the OSM price with the buffer, and in the early phase of auction, you may want that the price falls faster. So that's why exponential curve makes more sense, in my opinion, than the linear one. And then the difference is only the slope, right? What's the slope of this exponential curve? And as I said, you could make steeper curve or flatter curve. You will have a higher liquidation ratio. Then you have some pros and cons to it. And then you also need to weigh in different aspects, right? What's good for maker, what's good for vault holders, how will keepers react. It gets quite complicated. But yeah, it's mostly about the slope, which also defines the duration of the auction at the end. And then the duration is kind of important, right? Because you don't want them to clear too fast. You don't want them to clear, in few hours, because you might want a higher throughput.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that helps put my mind slightly at ease in terms of complexity.
Yeah, I'm planning to write the whole analysis soon. Hopefully, it won't be too complicated.
Another thing worth mentioning that will be discussed further in the upcoming security strategy announcement, but the complexity in general is going to increase over the long term, and so we're exploring decision support tools, and basically you could call it computer-aided governance to enable us to better understand the state of the system and the effects of policy changes and proposals.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. Looking forward to that security report more now. All right, so we're about a quarter past the hour, so we can maybe think about wrapping up. Oh, Nick, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so the Abdk audit, right? It was in my eyes, it was fairly thorough. I can tell you relative to what the foundation is usually paid for other audits, it's very good value. I wanted to reach out to them to see if maybe we could reach some kind of agreement in terms of having them on retainer, where every month they commit a certain amount of hours to doing auditing work for us. It's a consistent form of income for them. and it's kind of a guaranteed slot where we can get auditing work done. Getting auditors sometimes is a process that can take, many, many months if you want good ones. And people frequently kind of do this trade-off of like, oh, well, I can't get any of the good ones quickly, so we'll go with like a not so good one because they're available. And those are not the kind of trade-offs that you want to be making. So I think I want to formalize this into like a signal request more, but I would like to kind of go ahead and have that conversation with them.
I'll just hop in here and say that the audit came back and it was like very thorough, line by line. Even hit the documentation. I was really happy with what they produced for us.
Are you guys thinking that it would be like fall under a core units budget, or that we would kind of just pay directly from the protocol or something?
I was not thinking about it from a core unit perspective, but maybe that is the right way to do this. I'm not sure. I just know I want to lock these guys up before they get too popular,
I mean, there are a few options there. I mean, on one hand, since like it would be mostly a smart contracts and Oracle's teams that would make use of them, it could come out of some combination of those two teams' budgets. Or if we end up having like a dedicated security team specifically, or just a DAO-wide security budget, those would be options as well. I don't have a strong opinion. I'm just suggesting some possibilities.
I think maybe expecting them to kind of fill out the core unit sub-proposals to start with is maybe a little bit of a big ask. So maybe we want to set them up with kind of something, or like sort of an agreement for like retainer for the first few months. And then if they want to kind of formalize that further, then we can kind of bring them closer in, I guess.
Cool, yeah. So I'll kind of approach them with it, and if there's like a warm response from their side, then I'll kind of put a signal request together on the forum.
Yeah, I think that sounds fine. It's definitely something we sorely need. So I think you're going to be hard to find any sort of solid argument against, at least in the general case. Right? All right, so as I was saying, we're kind of coming up to half past the hour, so maybe this is a good time to wrap it up. Are there any kind of final points or comments or questions anybody wants to ask before we all go our separate ways? All right, seems like everyone's okay. So yeah, I think we'll leave it there for this week. So yeah, I thank you everyone for coming. As usual, this meeting will be the same time next week. Oh, actually, daylight savings starts soon. This meeting is set as UTC. So that may mean it will shift for some of you 1 hour, depending on whichever way daylight savings is. So yeah, I guess be aware of how that might affect you. Cool. So with that, oh yeah, happy Black Friday anniversary as well. I suppose it's not really happy, but yeah.
Oh, Peyton.
Cool. All right, we'll leave it there then. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and I'll talk to you all soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, everyone.